It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage Minister Vivian Balakrishnan, the Foreign Minister of Singapore and the Minister in charge of Smart Nation. Minister, the stage is yours.
Does my mic work? It does. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. You know, we're trying to fulfill Moore's Law as far as attendance is concerned. This year, we have double last year. That puts incredible challenge on the organizers for next year. But Professor Tan Chaw Tran, President of NUS, Yossi Vadi, where's Yossi hiding? Yossi Vadi, Daniel Seal, Lily Chan, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and I'm supposed to provide some comic relief and entertainment before you get on with the real business. But on a more serious note, if you look around the world today, if you look at the newspapers, what you will often feel is a deep sense of gloom. You read about terrorism, you read about unsolved conflicts, you read about slow growth rates, you read about young people, especially young people, being unemployed in many parts of the world. You see the rise of populist politicians. Now, I know this is not a rally speech, but you do see populist politicians on both the right and the left making convincing calls. And they'll say, look, it's doom and gloom, the middle class are being gutted, salaries are stagnating, globalization and technology are not helping the vast majority of people. What I wanted to leave with you today is that, in fact, what is going on is not due to a political right-wing conspiracy. And the answers do not lie in socialism in its extreme form, nor does it lie in right-wing isolation and trying to cut yourself off from competition or from technology. I believe the real thing that's happening in the world right now is that we are living through a technological revolution. Let me give you a few examples. A couple of weeks ago, AlphaGo defeated Lee Sedol, whom we know is the world's champion Go player. We also know, or at least you should know, that Go, the game, deceptively simple, is in fact far more complex than chess. And the old brute force algorithms would fail simply because there are just too many permutations. But AlphaGo, based on an algorithm which to some extent tries to emulate the pattern recognition of human beings, defeated the best human player. And I've heard that there's now a Chinese version that's trying to organize a game against AlphaGo by the end of the year. The point here is that artificial intelligence is improving, and I think, unlike the earlier promise 30 years ago, I think this time it's for real. If you look at what the financial institutions are doing, leveraging on more engaging and, I would say, captivating interfaces. So if you look in the finance side of it, brokers, remisers used to make a good living. Today, more and more people just trade online. But that's not it. Today, more and more intelligence is available through online portals. And in fact, you would probably move on to the companies, the financial institutions, which provide not just financial information, but allow you to do pattern recognition, allow you to trade quickly, faster, and to catch trends before everyone else does. Because those few microseconds of difference make all the difference between profit and loss. If you look at another example, if you look at what I see Jessica here, so I should mention Microsoft. You know, you came up with a bot, a chat bot, which was supposed to be able to interact with human beings and respond. And Microsoft had to take it down because basically it became too rude. It became racist. It hurled profanities. But if you actually stop to think about it, that bot actually probably passed the Turing test because it behaved exactly like a human being in an argument. Right? The point again, this is another example that in terms of pattern recognition, in terms of speed, in terms even of emulating human beings, there is a revolution in artificial intelligence. That's one example. If you think about the field of robotics, this is an exploding field. Last year, I think there are supposed to be about 35 million units of service robots. Service robots are robots that will provide personal and professional services. And we think that there'll be about 35 million units of service robots that will be sold over the next 2 or 3 years. Just the next 2 or 3 years. Of course, there are people who also worry that a combination of exploding and ever-improving artificial intelligence connected to robots which have effector arms and can do things will create this Skynet scenario. Those of you who've watched The Terminator will know that if you connect enough artificial intelligence, perhaps at some point it will derive consciousness, and maybe at some point it may decide that human beings are the problem and resort to a final solution. Well, that's one fear. But even if you have that fear, the answer does not lie by retreating from technology. In fact, it is better that those of us who do have morals and ethics and do have a worldview master these technologies rather than let someone else who will use it for purely commercial or political ends. And I've talked about robotics. Let me go to another field, virtual reality or augmented reality. The Prime Minister and I visited Facebook 2 months ago, and Mark Zuckerberg was proudly showing his Oculus technology. It's pretty good. They've improved it so you don't get seasick in it anymore. The gameplay is more interesting. But I told Mark, actually, the real killer app for augmented reality is not games. It's actually virtual sex. Mark looked at me and said, "You mean porn?" I said, no, stop to think about it. In fact, it is the porn industry that probably led to internet commerce on a big scale. And if you think about augmented reality and virtual sex, from a medical point of view, I can say it's going to be safe sex. You're not going to get HIV from it. But more importantly, there is an important message behind this. If you can successfully master virtual sex in augmented reality, you would have devised the ultimate UX, user interface. So the point is that this is another area that is exploding. So just add these 3 things, right? Artificial intelligence, robotics, and augmented reality. There is something huge going on in our world right now. Now, these technologies don't exist on their own. They build upon a platform of a couple of key elements. Number 1, cheap computing power. Number 2, pervasive connectivity. And number 3, access to a tsunami of data. Think about these 3 things, right? Computing power, cheap. Pervasive connectivity, always on, always connected. And it also has to be cheap or free, as it should be in many parts of Singapore already. And then, how do you deal with that tsunami of data? Someone was talking just now about that example where you swallowed a pill and the pill generated literally millions of images of your gut. Well, the real genius is not so much in acquiring millions of images, but the ability to analyze those images. And it has to do it better, faster, and more accurate than a human being. So, with these points in mind, I thought I'd share with you what the Singapore government is trying to do about this. As I said, to make sure that we as a country, as a nation, and as citizens can take full advantage of the digital revolution. Number one, we are trying to build the best digital infrastructure in the world. A crucial piece of this is connectivity. And that's why, for the past few years, we've been rolling out fiber to every home. And as I've said before, in fact, if you look at the optical network terminator in your home, there isn't just one fiber, there are two fibers. For redundancy and also to make sure that bandwidth will never be a limiting factor in Singapore. This connectivity is not just for you to surf and look at porn sites, although we know that at the moment, the bulk of internet traffic is video. But again, there is a more serious objective behind this. I've told where's Jacqueline? Jacqueline, over here. In the next 5 years, I want IDA to create a national operating system for 100 million smart objects. Stop to think about that. 100 million smart objects just in Singapore alone. Now, who constitutes these 100 million smart objects? Well, first of all, there's 5 million human beings, almost every one of whom is carrying a smartphone, leaking data, acquiring data, sensors built in. Every traffic light, every lamppost is another smart object. Every sensor, every camera, every surface is also both acquiring data and ultimately having a system which is able to analyze the data and create actionable insights and applications. So that 100 million smart objects is a big enough number to provide a challenge, but because it's going to be applied in a small focal place called Singapore, and because it will be, I hope, an open platform, it'll create a huge range of opportunities for application developers, service providers, companies and enterprises to leverage off. And that is a worthwhile challenge doing, and something which we can do in Singapore because it's a single layer of government. We're in a small, confined, compact island. We can roll out that infrastructure quickly, and we can test it. So, a national operating system for 100 million smart objects. The other thing I've told her to do is, nowadays, one key challenge is security. And a key subtopic in security is identity. How do you prove you are who you are? It might be easier when we have face-to-face conversations. But when you are interacting through screens or on the internet, how do you know and how do you trust the person on the other end of that transaction? And one key thing, she's partly solved it by improving our SingPass system. IDA knows I've been very unhappy for many years about the security for SingPass. Well, it's improved now. At least it's two-factor authentication. But that's only the beginning, because I believe we need some form of PKI, public key infrastructure, linked to our SingPass identities in order to give non-repudiation, security, encryption, end-to-end, in order to build that web of trust so that transactions can take place. I'll give you another example. People talk about electronic medical records. Well, we actually have a lot of medical records, but the reason you can't make it all available to you immediately is because of security. How do I know that only you and your doctors will access your data, and not your ex-girlfriend or your ex-wife who's looking for dirt to use in a divorce? Right? So digital security, and in fact the whole field of cybersecurity, is an immense field that's ripe for harvesting. The second thing which we're doing now, so I've settled this issue of infrastructure. The second thing which we're doing as a government is to stimulate research and development. And the Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2020 plan, in fact, sets aside $19 billion, not just for research work, but on translating research at the bench into applications in real life. So we're interested in the application of research to real life, to making a difference to the quality of life and to enhancing economic opportunities and good jobs for our people. The National Robotics Program has been beefed up. We've set aside $450 million to help our industry adopt potentially transformative automation and robotics. So that's on R&D. The third area we're focusing on is making government a smart buyer. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that government, and by proxy, people, have needs. And we want to move to a demand-driven model. So for instance, if I say, well, traffic congestion is an issue. Green energy is an issue. Security of transactions is an issue. These are needs of governments and needs of people, and then what we're going to do is then turn around to the public, to the private sector and say, well, guys, do you have a solution? A solution for water, for green energy, for congestion, for healthcare, for security. If your solution works, we'll buy it from you. But before that, we'll give you an opportunity to do proof of concept, prototype. If it works, we buy it from you. So that's, in my view, a better approach than simply giving money and grants on the supply side, but to focus on the demand side of the equation. So any one of you has got an idea, a product or a service which makes life better for citizens, come to Singapore, prove it, test it, prototype it, upscale it, and then ultimately, because we are smart buyers, you can then go to the rest of the world and say, well, this product worked in Singapore, the Singapore government paid good money for it, you know that this means something, and it gives you an opportunity. The fourth thing that we're doing is to focus on education. The Ministry of Education will be offering computing as an O-level subject in 19 secondary schools, this starting next year. And we'll roll this out across the board. Not that every single person needs to be able to code, but at least understand computational thinking, understand what the possibilities are, and how best to become masters and creators of the future artificial intelligence and robots, rather than the losing competitors to artificial intelligence and robots of the future. So education is a key element of our strategy. Finally, we need to get rules. You know, Singapore, they used to say Singapore is a fine city, right? We got a lot of rules, you transgress them, we come up to you. Well, in fact, what we need to do is to have a revolution in our policy and regulatory frameworks. So what do I mean by this? Let me give you an example. We all know about autonomous vehicles. I've taken a ride in the Google car. I've also taken a ride in a car in Singapore. It was an autonomous vehicle, in fact, which I think I2R built in about 9 months, meaning the technology is already available. But the real challenge for autonomous vehicles now is not computing. It's actually getting the licenses and the insurance and the laws right. And it's not so easy to do that. You know. And someone will say, well, what if an autonomous vehicle has an accident? And my answer is that you can't expect an autonomous vehicle to be perfect and never have an accident. But what you do want is for an autonomous vehicle to be safer than a human driver. And what that means then is you've got to make sure your road traffic legislation, your regulatory regime, your licenses all allow these new technologies to be applied. So for a start in One North, we're going to set aside 6 kilometers of the road where you are going to have to deal with autonomous vehicles. And hopefully we can solve the licensing and insurance issues. Those autonomous vehicles will be truly driverless. And in fact, NUS should do so within your own campus for the shuttle bus. It cannot be more complicated than One North. So, Chuan, that's something you need to follow up on. On the financial side, there's been a lot of hype about Bitcoin, distributed ledger systems, which don't depend on a central authority. I don't know whether Bitcoin will work. I strongly suspect blockchain technology is something profound, but my Prime Minister has told me, well, I think this is a solution looking for a problem, meaning we don't know yet what will work and what doesn't work. But for finance, because we believe that Singapore's future does depend on us continuing to be a global financial city, we've decided, when I say we, I mean the Monetary Authority of Singapore, has decided that we will create a regulatory sandbox for fintech, for financial technology companies. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that if any of you have an idea, a product, or a service in the financial industry, you can start up. You don't need approval from MAS. You can do anything you like as long as you don't cheat anyone. And you will not be smothered by regulations until you become big enough to actually be a threat to the financial system. But at that point, if you are so big, you're a success. So do you understand what I mean by a regulatory sandbox? Which means it gives you don't need to apply for a license or permit. Test your idea, grow your idea, and we'll only take a regulatory interest in you when you become big and successful enough to actually be a major player on the financial system as a whole. And this, again, gives you opportunities. You don't need to apply for licenses. You don't need to apply for permits. You're free to start up and to grow as quickly as you can. So basically what I'm trying to outline here is that we view the government's role as building infrastructure, enhancing capability, focusing on research and development, policy innovation, and basically building a conducive environment for startups, for people with crazy ideas, for people willing to crash rockets in order to pursue those moonshots. So a couple of other things I need to announce before I leave. The National Research Foundation will be embarking on a scheme in which we will encourage large local enterprises. In Singapore, we love acronyms, LLEs, large local enterprises. And what we want to tell these large local enterprises is, we want you to go and scan the horizon, identify small startups which may have novel potentially transformative ideas in your industry. Eat their dog food, test it out, and if it works, you gain. And we will also provide funding to support these partnerships between large local enterprises and startup companies. The National Research Foundation will be setting aside $40 million for this scheme. It's enough to kickstart this scheme, but the key message is that we are trying to encourage our own local big boys to partner our local startups. And it'll be win-win for both the big companies as well as the startup companies. Another announcement I'm glad to be able to make is that NUS is, together with its partners, has developed a platform which we call Tech SG. And this is basically a platform that will connect founders, investors, incubators, technology sources to create a platform where ideas, people, and smart money can be connected. Again, what this does is that it takes research out of academia quickly into the marketplace. It accelerates options and opportunities for startup entrepreneurs, and it quickly connects you into the larger ecosystem. So I believe these platforms will provide rich opportunities for many of you who are here today. Finally, I want to end by making this point. I started off by saying that the world is going through a tough time. There's gloom and doom in many parts of the world. There's a lack of opportunities. There's anxieties about fairness. I've told you, actually, the real diagnosis is that we are living through a digital revolution. And this digital revolution is going to give huge opportunities to the people who get it, who understand it. And what we are trying to do in Singapore is to create the most conducive environment for people who get it, to be able to build it, so that in future, people will come to Singapore, and when they leave, they will say, I have seen the future, and it works. So, welcome to a wonderful future, and it's a privilege to be alive and to have a ringside seat to the revolution of our lifetimes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister.